The biggest cycling event ever. In August this year, the world's greatest riders will get together in Glasgow and across Scotland to compete at the highest level, make history and show the world the power of the bike. There will be 13 World Championships across 7 disciplines, taking place over 11 days and featuring the awarding of over 200 rainbow jerseys. The 2023 UCI Cycling World Championships will be an event like never before. Can you tell I'm excited? I'm Michael.
And I'm John. And for the first time ever, BMX, track, mountain biking, trials, road and paracycling will come together and hold a combined World Championships. And that's not all. Have you ever seen artistic cycling or cycle ball? Well, you will at the Emirates Arena this summer. This is Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy, and after the success of the Commonwealth Games and the Rugby League World Cup in 2022, this event is undoubtedly one of the highlights of the domestic sporting calendar.
Hi, I'm Trudy Lindblade, Chief Executive of the 2023 UCI Cycling World Championships that will be held in Glasgow and across Scotland later this year. And I'm very privileged to be leading the team that's been charged with creating, planning and delivering this brand new world event for sport.
Trudy, fantastic to have you on Great British Bosses. We are super excited about what is happening in Glasgow this year. But for those that maybe don't know, in the past, there's been separate world championships for BMX, for mountain bike, road, all the different disciplines that we've highlighted in our intro. This is something brand new, something unique, and the first time you've ever done this. Tell us a bit about it.
It is bringing all of the Cycling World Championships together for the very first time. So the UCI president, David Lepartient, when he first came into his position, part of his manifesto was to create this event that would bring all the World Championships together. And part of it was forward-looking to consider that sustainable future of cycling. How can cycling be bigger and better and make sure that we've got people participating in the sport, but also that broader element of cycling, which is just about riding your bike on the weekend or using it to get to and from work or however you might ride your bike. So by bringing the 13 World Championships together in one, it provides cycling its moment on the sporting calendar, and it will provide its moment on the sporting calendar every 4 years. So each year, the individual World Championships will continue to be held in their single format. But then every 4 years, on the year preceding the Olympic Games, the cycling world will come together with all the World Championships to celebrate cycling in all its form. Olympic disciplines, non-Olympic disciplines, some you may have heard before, some you may not have. And I think that's a lot of the appeal, and there's a lot of stories to tell.
And we still have this sporting calendar, which, if you like, has been compacted because of the pandemic and the shutdown. So in the same way that the Rugby League World Cup held in the United Kingdom in 2022 brought the men's game, the women's game and the wheelchair game together, to make a splash on the global stage with a sporting event at the minute, do you need to have that different kind of thinking?
Well, I think that's the way sport is heading. So, inclusivity has to be at the core of what we're doing. So for us, I think it's bringing a point of difference together. So we've brought 13 World Championships together, but we've also brought para and able-bodied cycling World Championships together as well. And then in addition to that, we'll be closing out the World Championships with the elite women's race, whilst the men's race will be on that first weekend. So we're doing things a little bit differently, and that's what I'm really proud of. And I know that the UCI were really keen to do in the establishment of this event, along with our partners. So yes, doing something different, making sure that we're thinking about all of our athletes and providing the best possible platform for them to achieve their best. And that might mean doing things just that little bit differently. So for us, track cycling is a really good example. You'll see for the first time a fully integrated track schedule, so para and able-bodied track. Now, that's a really complicated thing to do when you've only got a certain number of days that you've got to fit that in, you've got to fit training in, and we've got one Olympic-sized velodrome here in Glasgow, and it's an amazing velodrome, as we all know, but, we have to fit that in a certain period of time. So for us, though, that's not too hard because we know the outcome is going to make all of that work worthwhile.
Trudy, how big could this be? And the reason I asked this question is I've covered the Olympics. Michael and I have covered the Olympics since 2012. And I always remember being told this is 26 world championships in one. That was what the Olympics was. So you've got 13 world championships. So that's half the size of the Olympics. So how big could this actually become?
I haven't actually thought about that one, John, before, but you're right. When from a perspective, it is huge. And one of the analogies that we like to use is actually more relating to the Commonwealth Games in terms of size and scale, because in terms of the number of athletes and officials, will actually be bigger than a Commonwealth Games of the athletes and officials coming into Glasgow and Scotland. So we'll have around 8,000 athletes, because we have a number of amateur competitions as well, which I think is another one of those sort of great things about this event, because you combine that aspirational elite element, but you also get those people that, are competing at the best in their age group or in their, aspirational of their heroes. So from our perspective, the Commonwealth Games is a good benchmark, but we, because the UCI has 202 member federations, it has that truly global scale. So we're probably a blend between the two, to be honest, and it absolutely has the ability to be of significant size and scale. And in fact, the 2027 hosts have got more than 13 world championships. So I know that they're keenly watching us in France to see what we do. And then they've got 4 more. I think they've got 17 world championships that they'll have to deliver. So there's elements of the sport of cycling that I'm sure many listeners and yourself might not have even considered before. And I certainly know that artistic cycling or indoor cycling were not something I'd had a great deal of experience in before coming into this role.
I won't ask you about them then. Well, can you tell? Because I mentioned them in the intro, didn't I? Artistic
I can.
And cycle ball. I'm assuming cycle ball is like football.
It is, exactly. It is.
But on bikes.
So it is. So those two sports, I like to talk about them actually, because I think they are so different to what everybody is expecting. So the best way to describe artistic cycling is like gymnastics on a bike. You will see the athletes using the bike, and they'll be I suppose doing handstands. There will be 2 or 3 on a bike. So sort of if you think about cheerleading and you've got the triangle of people on a bike, you can't see my hands. I'm trying to describe that visually, but that's not helpful. So it's beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. And you can hear a pin drop in the venue. And then it's intertwined with cycle ball, which is football on a bike. So a ball that is hit with the front wheel, which is really hard to do. It's 2 against 2. And again, so then you've got the raucousness of that sport. And you've got this juxtaposition of 2 very different sports, but in the one event. And it's very much in the heartland of Netherlands, Germany, and in that area of Europe. So you can imagine the type of audience that also heads along to that. And it's a really informed and engaged audience that I think for those people who'd like to see what it's all about in Scotland will have a really terrific time, because they'll be able to learn from those around them, because we do know we'll get a lot of people coming out from those countries to see the indoor cycling events.
I've covered Tour de France, Grand Depart when it was in Yorkshire. I've covered every edition of the Tour de Yorkshire. And the thing that makes it for me is that opportunity for riders, amateur riders, enthusiasts, if you like, to ride the same course as the elites do later on in the day. And that was important to you in your event. And you've got some of those mass participation events that people can get involved with in the summer.
As actually part of formal parts of the event with the World Championships, we've got the Gran Fondo, which will be, which there are qualifying events being held around the world as we speak, for participants to come and qualify here in Scotland. And then we've also got the mountain bike marathon and also the BMX challenge, which are all amateur competitions. And, think about the BMX challenge, where you've got around 2,000, young kids to older adults to, they're wearing their country's colours, competing as amateur amateur athletes. And then, the following days, you've got the best BMX riders in the world competing for their world championship. So that's what I really love about this event, is that opportunity. But then separate to that, we will also be working with Scottish Cycling, having opportunities for, people to experience the power of the bike. So experience the world. So how do we get more people riding their bikes and being part of this event? And we're working with Scottish Cycling on how we can benefit, but they can benefit from a local perspective with getting more people on their bikes, more people into their clubs, and more people competing as well. So there's more to come, certainly on that element. We're working very closely with them, but yes, we'll be providing opportunities where we can for people to touch and feel and experience this event in many different ways.
Since you arrived in Glasgow, have you heard the phrase pure, dead, brilliant?
I don't think I have heard. I've heard lots of different phrases, Michael, but I don't know if I've heard that one. You better explain more.
Pure, dead, brilliant was a phrase used at the closing ceremony of the 2014 Commonwealth Games by the president of the CGF. And it's a bit of local vernacular, if you like, to how good that event was, the 2014 Commonwealth Games. Why this event then? Why Glasgow? Why Scotland?
Well, Scotland is the perfect stage for major events, isn't it? And I think events like the Commonwealth Games in 2014, the European Championships in 2018, both multi-sport, really large events, along with those one-off World Championships that Glasgow has also held, has put them in good stead. And it's not just also about those Olympic sports. If you think to Ryder Cup, Solheim Cup, the home of golf, and not just on the sporting landscape, but also the cultural landscape. Think of the festivals held each year in August, the Fringe Festival. So there are so many different major events here in Scotland that it's just got the perfect landscape. So it's got a ready-made audience of people that love attending major events. You've got experienced people in delivering major events, whether it be councils, funding partners, government, and then you've got venues, terrific venues. We haven't had to build a venue for this event. We will be coming in using existing venues. We will be making some tweaks to venues. The most work we'll be doing is down in the Tweed Valley, in Glentress, working with Forestry Land Scotland and the Scottish Borders Council down there to as part of the master plan, because we're doing so much mountain bike, building that as a home of mountain biking in the south of Scotland. So that's where we'll be doing the most work, but that is minor compared to what many major events will often have to bring with large scale infrastructure. We've got it all. And I think that's one of the benefits of cycling races as well. You don't need a lot apart from a velodrome when you do need that velodrome.
Now, there's a slight accent that I can hear, Trudy, that's not quite Scottish coming through at the moment. And we do want to talk to you about your career and how you've come to be in charge of these cycling world championships. But tell us, firstly, how people right across the UK, right across the world can come and support it and watch this event.
So, of course, we'd like as many people as they can to travel to Glasgow and Scotland for this event, because I can tell you, moving to Scotland for the very first time, I hadn't been to Scotland before I took on this role. I'd always wanted to go to Scotland, and then this opportunity came up, so I was fortunate. So it's an incredible country with incredible landscapes and cities and all of those things that you're looking for. But then we've got this amazing event. So tickets are on sale. You can get them through Ticketmaster or through our website, cyclingworldchamps.com. Tickets start from as little as £5. And, we are, selling tickets to sort of the big events such as the track cycling, the mountain bike downhill. There's also all the free events. It is such an accessible sport. You can be lining the roads. If you live along a course route, for example, you can be taking your deck chairs down to the end of your driveway. You can grab your tipple of your choice, your baguette, your ham, your cheese, and you can sit there and enjoy. You might bring your haggis if you're here in Scotland, but, I'll leave that to people to decide. And you can just enjoy, the cycling. But if you can't make it here in person, it will be broadcast globally around the world. We'll be announcing all our global broadcasters shortly, but it is, and that's something that we're really excited about. And we've also already announced that it'll be live on BBC around the UK. So you'll be able to watch it on TV, on streaming, and on digital.
And it's also really important to work with local communities, and you're doing that as well, and working with certain local groups and making sure that funding goes their way as well.
Absolutely. So with the Scottish Government funding this event, it was really important for this to be, and you'll hear me talk about it, and you'll hear others talk about it, to say this is Glasgow and across Scotland. So this is a truly pan-Scotland event. Glasgow is the hub of this event, and then we were trying to keep everything within a 1.5 hour, 90-kilometre radius of Glasgow, which isn't always easy because you need a mountain for a mountain bike downhill event. So we're sneaking a little bit further up to Fort William, which is a stunning place to go, and is home of the mountain bike downhill here in Scotland, hosting the World Cup for the last 20 or so years. So that's what we've tried to do. And then in addition to that, we've got a number of inspired by projects that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the 2023 Cycling World Championships. So we've got an £8 million facilities fund. So we've got facilities being built all around Scotland as a legacy and an outcome of this event. So you'll see pump tracks going up, you'll see BMX tracks going up. And these are in small communities in Scotland so that the kids can get out on their bikes, adults too, and experience, that freedom and that power of the bike. We've also got a communities fund, which we pulled together with Events Scotland, Sports Scotland and ourselves, which is so that we can engage with all 32 local authorities here in Scotland. So if the local authorities want to run an event in and around this event or in the lead up to, how can we support them in doing that? So we get as many people as we can talking about cycling, talking about the event, and talking about the power of the bike, and getting to use our great squiggly bike logo, which is this sort of free-form bike or whatever you want it to be. And that logo, we've worked with the UCI to make sure that can be used long after the event. And the UCI have granted us the approval to use their rainbow stripes, which they don't give away lightly, because as we know, that's what the world champions wear, and they wear that with pride. But those little rainbow stripes will live on in our legacy logo. And that is something that is, really important to us. And we're very grateful to the UCI for seeing our vision and allowing us to do that.
Well, if people are listening around the world and they are heading to see that mountain biking at Fort William, McTavish's Kitchen would be a good restaurant recommendation there. Get a proper Scottish welcome. And if you're heading up to watch a little bit of cycling around Loch Lomond, the Drovers Inn would be a pub recommendation as well. I think people might have heard of that one. Let's talk a bit about you, though, Trudy, as we are on Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy. What has brought you to this job? Experience in cycling before, and before that, cricket?
Absolutely. So my background is sort of mainly in those two sports. I worked for a number of years in cricket it was the Australian Cricket Board back then. So now I'm showing my age a little bit, and then Cricket Australia. And then spent a number of years and then working, also fortunate to work with the International Cricket Council and heading over to the 2007 World Cup in the West Indies, where I was based in Jamaica for 18 months. So
Oof, nice.
A few stories to tell about my time there, but delivered an incredible event in certainly challenging times. So that was 9 countries, 13 venues. So that was significant. And then got a chance to work in cycling. I did a couple of sort of smaller things in a couple of Olympic Games sports, but to head up to work on the 2010 Road World Championships were held in Geelong and Melbourne, and that was the first time the Road Worlds had been held in the Southern Hemisphere. So there was a lot that we had to do to get to get people to understand the benefits in the sport of cycling from an elite perspective, but what they can leave behind for communities, and off the back of that, cycling was really developing as a sport at that time, and we held the Road World Championships, and then I went on to the Track Cycling World Championships, and then Cadel Evans won the Tour de France in 2011, the first Australian ever to win the Tour de France. And the state of Victoria at that time were looking to how they could build on the World Championships in 2010, and Cadel won the Tour de France, and people were wanting to name bridges and roads and that after him, and that was probably not what Cadel was after. And then this race called the Cadel Evans Great Ocean Road Race was born, and that was part of my sort of foray into World Tour cycling. And then I'm here in Glasgow and Scotland running this incredible event for Visit Scotland and the Scottish Government and our partners in the UCI. So I feel very fortunate and privileged to be in this position.
I like the fact he was getting bridges named after him. When Bradley Wiggins won it in 2012, all we let him do was ring the bell at the start of the Olympic opening ceremony in London. I want to ask a little bit more about you then and your style of leadership. Is this the biggest challenge that you have taken on, and how attractive was it that your job was to try and deliver something for the first time, something new, something where you maybe had a blank piece of paper?
Absolutely. So this is certainly the biggest event that I have certainly led in terms of challenges. I referred back to the 2007 Cricket World Cup. When I look back and reflect, and when I was thinking about this role, I was going, well, 9 countries, 13 venues. That was pretty tricky. It was a different stage in my career. I headed up the events team for that, and I've done a lot of things since then. And it's and in and around cycling, but there was probably a little bit of fear, a little bit of challenge, and a little bit of excitement about this brand new event. And I remember seeing it advertised, this role advertised, and CEO 2023 UCI Cycling World Championships. I'm like, oh, I'd love to do that role. Oh, it's in Scotland. It's a long way away. Am I ready? All of those sorts of things that you go through as that next step in your career. And it was a little nudge from one of my mentors who said to me, I think you should put your name in for that, Trudy. I think you could do it, and you could do it well. And I probably needed that nudge, particularly because it was, on the other side of the world. And it is a new sort of leadership job for me, but a great opportunity. And I think for me, it was about being involved in something for the very first time, a sport that I love. I've become very passionate about cycling. I ride on the weekends with my kids, and I ride to and from work. That's the extent of me. I've tried indoor cycling as well. We have the Zwift indoor trainer and all of that, and I get on that. But this role for me is a really important one, and it's been a really challenging one coming over. I moved in the middle of the pandemic. I've established the team completely. The first probably 30 staff were all virtually interviewed. I was virtually interviewed. So, I say I took a risk coming over here, but, Visit Scotland and the event funding partners took a risk on me as well. So, we've all come in this together. My style of leadership, though, is I have a collaborative style to my leadership. I like to make sure that I'm bringing my team along the journey with me. And that's been hard to do when you do that remotely, and you're doing that all virtually and in the middle of a pandemic, and then some of the other, obviously, macroeconomic factors that we've had to deal with inflation, the war in Ukraine, cost of living, and we're still experiencing that today. So I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I'm in the middle of it. It's 148 days to go. We've got an incredible team. We've got hugely supportive funding partners, and that's what you need to deliver something brand new for the very first time in quite a challenging environment. So I certainly feel well supported, and I certainly feel my background has held me in good stead to take this step into this role.
You said your friend gave you a nudge, but as you absolutely said, you joined in October 2020, and it's hard to remember what that was like. It was in the middle of right in the middle of the pandemic. Moving the other side of the world. We'd heard all these stories about how people hadn't seen their families and all that. It's such a personal decision, but such a challenge that you wanted to accept.
Absolutely. And we actually went through that when I first put my name in for the role. That was in January or February in 2020. So the pandemic hadn't even started yet. So, and I think my first interview was February. And then once we got into it, I said to my husband when we were getting closer, I said, we've got a really hard decision to make here. We're in a pandemic. This role is just such a good opportunity, I think, for my career. What a great property to be working on in a country like Scotland. All the ingredients there with a really great set of partners, but also, I was the board members were starting to come through at that point in time as well. So I knew we had a really strong board, and it was like, this is something we really need to do, but we're in a pandemic. And if we leave Australia, we don't know if we'll we don't know when we're going to get back, because at that point in time, we had to fill out a piece of paper to leave Australia and the government had to approve it. So, so it was like, are we going to do this? And we sort of sat down, had those discussions, he's a photographer. What's he going to do? How are we going to do that? We went, you know what? Our kids are at the right age. How often do you get these opportunities? And let's go for it. If I'm successful in this role, then that's it. We're going for it. And I was successful, and the rest is history. We're here. Went from one lockdown to the next lockdown. So there was quite a bit of lockdown happening in the first little bit. But you know what? That all just seems like so long ago. I'm in the office, pretty much every day of the week with the rest of the team. And, yes, we're still dealing with some of the flow-on effects of the pandemic. I talk about people, pennies, and process. And, some of those things have been completely challenged by having to start this event during a lockdown. But, when you've got good people, you can do amazing things.
Well, we're so glad that you did come. Paul Buxton is the chief exec of GB Taekwondo, and he's a previous guest on this series, season 4 of Great British Bosses. He told us that the UK is still the best place to put on a multi-sport event, or putting on world-class sporting events. As an Australian, but here as a Great British Boss, where do you stand on that?
Oh, that's a really tricky but very good question. I have to say, I can't lose being an Australian and also living here in the UK. I have been really impressed with the partners that we've got with this event, with how the partnerships are structured, and certainly with UK Sport, Scottish Government, and Glasgow City Council in particular. Certainly working as one to deliver this event. Now, each of those funding partners comes from a different perspective. If you think about UK Sport, elite performance, high performance, Glasgow as a city, and the Scottish Government. So, but you bring all that together and you mold that together, and you deliver great outcomes. So, I think the fact that you've got Europe on your doorstep, that you've got great infrastructure, and certainly the people, I think, though, there's been some challenges that have been brought out through that. So with Brexit and some of the changes there, we don't have the workforce that I would have said that probably existed before the pandemic and before Brexit. We've seen people leave the industry. So I think there's some of those factors. Some of the Australians that I thought I might have been able to pick up as part of my workforce to supplement the great UK resources that we've got, which is often the case, we haven't been able to do that. And some of that's been because of just the sheer number of events that were held in late 2022. So as a spectator, incredible. You had a feast of sport at your fingertips, and watching them in the same time zone. I've got to tell you, not being up at 2:00 in the morning is absolutely brilliant. Sometimes I sit watching the TV and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. That's been really interesting for me, because I did think coming over here there'd just be this significant group of people, and I still probably don't fully have the answer, but I think it's a mix of the incredible event calendar that was there, obviously not purely by choice, but it would have been an amazing event calendar anyway at the end of 2022. And then you've got people that have probably made life choices in the last 2 years about, I've started doing something different during the pandemic, and I quite like doing that. Events are hard, they're brilliant. We love them. They provide this adrenaline that you probably can't describe until you're in it. But they're also really hard work. And, when you've been doing it for a long time, there's sometimes becomes a point where people go, you know what, I might have a little bit of a change. So, and I think some of that's happened during the pandemic, but I definitely have felt the support. And I think I certainly think the UK is a great spot for hosting major events, undoubtedly.
That said, of course, the eyes of the world will be turning to the Southern Hemisphere. And I'm not going to accept from you an answer to my next question that you're 100% focused on the UCI Cycling World Championships. We will take that as read. But you must have half an eye on the fact that 2026, Australia will be hosting a Commonwealth Games, and then Brisbane hosting the 2032 Olympic Games. These are both back home for you, aren't they? There must be something that's maybe there on the horizon for you.
Absolutely. Well, it's really it's great that Australia has been, obviously awarded those events, and certainly the Commonwealth Games coming back to Melbourne after the 2006 Commonwealth Games. And I was actually living in Jamaica during that time, prepping for the cricket World Cup. But I did have the good fortune. A friend of mine got married the week before the Commie Games, so I made it home and I made it to some of those events, and boy, it was incredible. So I can see, that excitement building again for 2026, and also a different model, which is also really interesting. So how Victoria is decentralising that model, bringing in the regional cities, and using the Commonwealth Games as a legacy impact for, so social housing and, some of those sorts of elements, but also building on those regional communities. And I can understand that from my time working for Visit Victoria, where, regional communities like here in Scotland are just so important. You need to make sure that you're bringing in those communities. So from that perspective, and then of course Brisbane in 2032, what an opportunity for Australia off the back of the Sydney Olympics in 2000. I remember the Sydney Olympics and just the boost that gave, similar to London in 2012, just the boost that it gives the major events and sporting industry, the people that it brings in, so people that have not worked on these events before. And then, as some of us older people, I won't say us, like I won't put you fine gentlemen in that, but as we
Feel free.
work our way through our careers, we're bringing those new lifeblood through, and major events needs that. And major events, the size and scale of the Cycling World Championships or an Olympic Games, a Commonwealth Games, that's the cycle, isn't it? It's the cycle of life, and it's the cycle of major events, and we need those new, young, bright people coming through to be the leaders of the future. And that's what major events and events of size and scale can do.
Before Michael asks the last question, it's literally just dawned on me, Trudy, that when Brisbane holds the 2032 Olympic Games, it's 32 years since Sydney. That's 3 decades. That is, we are in that age. I can't believe that. It's actually quite scary. It's now just leaping out at me, and I'm like thinking, 30 years. Holy schmoly.
I didn't mean to do that, John, but yes, it is. And you know what? I can still remember some of it as clear as day.
Exactly. We were up in the wee small hours over here watching Sir Steve Redgrave win his 5th gold medal. Yeah,
it's incredible. And if you think to London 2012, it's the same thing. That'll be 20. I'm putting it all into perspective, aren't I?
Yeah, you are.
I'm going to stop
please.
now. I'm stopping.
So very neatly, you are back on message talking about the cycle of major sporting events. Let's talk about yours. Less than 150 days to go. The 3rd to the 13th of August, 2023. The UCI Cycling World Championships. We said 13 World Championships across 7 disciplines. What is your final message to someone listening to Great British Bosses now about why they should come and get involved, whether that is as a spectator, a television viewer, a volunteer? Why should they come to Glasgow? Why should they come to Scotland? Why should they support your event?
I think you've actually summed it up perfectly, because this is an event that's going to be done for the very first time. So you want to be part of that. So come and be part of something for the very first time in an incredible country like Scotland, where you can come and watch the cycling, and then afterwards you can, go and explore some of the lochs, the towns, the coastlines, have a dram of whiskey if you like, or whatever it is that you enjoy. Tickets are £5, so it's not, we've made sure that we've priced this so that it's accessible, but also that you can just learn about the power of the bike. For me, it's as simple as that. What we want to do is make sure that we provide a platform for our athletes to be the best in the world and be the best that they can be. But also we want people to also realise that the bike is more than just a humble bike, and more than just something to win world championship medals on. You can use it to get to and from work. You can use it to ride with your kids. You can use it for your mental health. You can use it to ride around Scotland as you see the beautiful sights. So if we can give that message about the power of the bike, give you an amazing experience in Scotland, which I know will give you, and we can give the athletes the best platform to be the best they can be, and you've had a great time watching it and taken home some wonderful memories, then I think our job is done.
Well, dram of whiskey, that'll do for me. We look forward to seeing you there in Glasgow, seeing you in Scotland in August. Trudy Lindblade, CEO at the 2023 UCI Cycling World Championships in Glasgow. Thank you for being a pure, dead, brilliant guest on Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy.
Thank you.